Sword of Coming Chapter 823. Cheeky, let's talk about the 8 to 14 physical books of Genlai. They should be available in JD. Com, Dang Dang and Wenchuan, and there may be signed books, because at that time, they were required to sign a full 2,000 copies. S signature. This Mount Jingyang, which has the largest number of sword repairs on a continent, is not the Great Wall of Small Sword Chi in Aquarius. The younger generations of sword repairers of the old and new peaks of Jingyang Mountain all believed so sincerely, and many of the fairy sects outside Jingyang Mountain were also so compatible. In fact, there is no impression of the Great Wall of Sword Chi in the sky, as well as the farther ascending city, the Aquarius genealogical master and Shan Zaiyi Shou. If it weren't for the Tuor and the Wei and Jin dynasties, and the tragic war that hit the entire Hauran world afterwards, the monks on the mountain would only talk less about the Great Wall of Jinchi. And the sword top formation on the first-line peak of Jingyang Mountain, isn't it hailed as another imitating white jade capital? Can you kill the fairyland practitioner casually? Almost all the people who watched the ceremonies from the peaks had previously looked up at the incredible floating sword formation. The weather was so varied and the movement was so loud that no one could help but watch the spectacular and thrilling scene. What kind of high level, how much sword aura, and how to cultivate the heart, can we create this magnificent sword formation that resonates with the world? When in Aquarius Island, outside of the Fengshua Temple in the Wei and Jin dynasties, there was a sword fairy like Lu Xianyang who was flying swords and seeing who fell to the ground, and there was also such a sword fairy with outstanding swordsmanship and superb skills. In the end, only a few lucky ones saw Chen Pingan at the foot of the mountain falling to the ground, holding a long sword in his hand. The sword light suddenly appeared, first an arc, flashing away, and then the young sword fairy cut the root of the mountain. Knock on the hilt again, a sword provokes the peak of the mountain, as if effortlessly. Therefore, only those who saw the sword formation hit the ground, all of them hated the long river of time and couldn't reverse the flow, and couldn't see the real sword of the sword fairy in the green shirt at the foot of the mountain. Isn't it a good idea to ask Jingyang Mountain for the sword after a stick of incense? The Lord of the Fallen Mountain, what he said doesn't count. Worthy of being a mountain sword fairy. Before Chen Pingan asked the sword without warning, especially since the sword formation had not appeared before, in general, the attention of the spectators was still on the various people from the Luopa Mountain. Higher on the peak of Full Moon Peak, Zhu Lian, the old butler who was the first to speak, is short and plain, but he is clearly a martial artist in the mountain world with his skills. He is condensed into substance with his strong fist, like water flowing down and scattered. Such as the fairy crushing white clouds everywhere in the sky. This person is in Luopa Mountain. What kind of identity is this person the first to show up for his name? Couldn't it be that Chao Xuanshou was willing to give Lupashan's face like this because he was born as a martial artist in the frontier army of Dali? God knows, this Luopa Mountain is really covered by clouds and mist, too awkwardly hidden. It is simply rising up inexplicably. Could it be that Luopa Mountain is a mountain supported by Dali in secret, and it is bright and dark with the Longquan sword sect of Saint Wan? In that case, does it make sense that Chao Xuanshou left earlier? Located on the Qinggu Peak on the edge of the Jingyang Mountain boundary, a young woman with a bun tied into a ball, a major disciple of the Kaishan, Pei Qian. She is already the newest martial artist in Aquarius, but she is temporarily in the remote travel realm. In accordance with the rules of the teacher, the samurai must fall 2 or 3 times first to travel down the mountain and treat others with sincerity. It's really Jing Qian. First he fisted to kill the demon in Jinjiazu, then he asked Deduan Chao Ci about the fist, and then returned to our hometown and caught up with the battle on the battlefield of Paidu. It is a pity that I heard a lot of punches, but it is difficult for outsiders closer. It's mostly a glimpse, because I have a friend on the mountain who was fortunate to have seen this great female master punch with my own eyes. I heard that it is extremely overbearing. She punches a demon clan and never has a whole body. Specially select those large hinterland where the monster race is densely packed, and punch down the battlefield with a radius of tens of meters. The world will be clear in an instant. In the end, only Jing Qian can stand. Therefore, it is rumored that she is now among the mountain monks. There are already 2 nicknames of Jing Qingming and Jing Seiqian, which roughly means that wherever she goes, it is like throwing paper money during the Qingming festival, and there are dead people all around. Everyone, imagine, if it were you and I against her. It's conceivable that Zheng Yangshan has kicked the iron plate today. It's not good to provoke a great master like Jing Qian. But she said that she was the great disciple of the mountain, and she was the martial arts biography of the young mountain master of the mountain. But is the mountain master clearly a sword fairy? How to teach her boxing? Most of it is that there is another expert in Luopa Mountain who teaches boxing. She just followed the young mountain master to go up the mountain to practice. In fact, she has no identity. It is extremely, otherwise the mountain lord who is still very young heard that he is both a land sword fairy and a martial artist of the 9 realms, it would be too unreasonable. In the sky of Shuilong Peak, Cui Dongshan, who claims to be the proud student of the mountain lord, is a white-clothed boy with a red mole on his eyebrows. He has also fallen a bit today, showing only the appearance of a jade monk. The right guardian Zhou Mili of the Luopa Mountain beside him, this little girl in black who is not high in realm, has an unfathomable realm, and is the only visitor who only cultivates in the cave. All fools know that this right guard must not be underestimated. After all, this little girl who seems to be of a water descent spirit, according to her identity, but what kind of mountain protection of the fallen mountain, the world's famous mountain fairy mansion, can serve as the existence of the mountain protection, often like the master Zhanglu, within the mountain gate. The best fight is just one to defend against the enemy from the outside and the other to control the rules and precepts of the patriarch hall internally. Is it probably because she disdains to observe Xingyang Mountain with a true state today? On the side of Pianjiu Peak, Zhou Fei, who claims to be the chief worshipper, looks like a student in the lower reaches of the mountain, but although his temples are frosty and white, he is still romantic in his blue shirt. Apart from his back sword, he still has a long sword with his foot on his feet. Sword fairy style. The long sword on the back was named Jiawasheng, borrowed by Chief Zhou and Brother Cui. This one under his feet, Jiang Shangzhen acquired from a secret house in Luzhou, Beiju, named Tian Broom. Borrowing the sword with Cui Dongshan, then when returning the sword, he must also give the broomstick. Jiang Shangzhen naturally has no objection to this. In the words of Brother Cui, it is that I and Chief Zhou are close friends who have changed lives. Don't be polite with Chief Zhou, and when Chief Zhou is polite with me, let alone be polite. Lu Laoqing, Lu Zhimao, Li Fuchang, the 2 masters of Xinjing sect, actually did not leave Xingyang Mountain too far, and they were still paying attention to the situation of Xingyang Mountain. When they saw this person far away, the 3 of them had only wry smiles. The first suzerain in the history of Zhenjingzong, the old suzerain of Yuguizhong, has never done things so unreasonably, even if Lu Laoqing and Lu Zhimao are fierce generations of wild cultivation, they have also entered the upper 5 realms. Jiang Shangzhen, there are still the slightest extra distracting thoughts, and he dare not have it. It is powerful and can't be beaten. If it is intrigue, it is far worse. Qiong Jifeng, the sword immortal of the Jade Pure Realm, had a young face and an unusually handsome appearance. When she narrowed her eyes, she was fascinated by her sight. The key is that this second person enshrines a magnificent sword aura like a waterfall hanging down the sky, and the sky is shining, covering the entire Cheongji Peak under his feet, and finally 2 long rivers of sword aura of the same origin and different streams, lingering around Cheong respectively. The branch peaks, one high and one low, slowly revolve around the mountain peaks, making a mountain boundary, halfway up the mountain, and the morning glow sword gas glows with layers of golden light. Near the top of the mountain, the sunset glow is gorgeous like a fire, and the sword gas is so abundant and still not hurt the slightest. So that Leng Qi, the female ancestor of Cheong Jifeng, could only take her direct descendants, holding their breath one by one, and walking through the small door with their heads down. Qiu Lingshan, a tall woman who claims to be in charge of a long life, is dressed in a white robe and has a vague style. The place where she stands is overflowing with brilliance, and she is an unquestionable fairy. Shuilong Peak, Chen Lingjun, who looks like a child in Tsing Yi, stepped on a Dragon King basket that was made for his life, with arms around his chest, as long as he leaves the small town of Liju Cave, where is Uncle Chen not uncle? Chen Lingjun felt sorry in his heart, brother Jia, busy in vain, Chen Julio, these good friends, good brothers, none of them were present today, and they had never seen their heroic appearance. It was a pity in their lives. A martial artist planting autumn, the old master's martial arts realm is not high in Luapa Mountain, it is just a bottleneck in the remote travel realm, but at the same time planting autumn is a golden core monk who is proficient in Confucian energy training. In the past years in the lotus roots in that hometown, Nanyuan Guisher, who was praised by the rivers and lakes as the master of the literary sage, was indeed very likely to make this statement worthy of the name in the even more vast and vast world. Yujiao Peak, on the right of Jinqiu Sui, one day before, during a bright moon night, she made a night swim in the Shujian Lake and quietly entered the Yuaning realm. Shi Rou, the shopkeeper who was settled by an ascending alien demons, is standing above Zhuyu Peak, riding the Dragon Lane and wearing Shi Rou, who has been wearing Du Mao's legacy for many years, taking this opportunity to finally see the day again as a woman. The scenery seen in the eyes of the Huawei Tianma is as clear as Shi Rou in Qilong Lane, even clearer than the view of the mountains and rivers in the hands of gods. The entire Xinjiang mountain boundary is captured by them. Hongxia of the Yuanying stage water Jiao only felt that standing here today was the only embarrassing existence to make up the number. It's just that she often thinks of someone, as if she doesn't want to think less, but she doesn't dare to think more. The Zhua Shilang from the Ministry of Rights in Dali capital, Dong Hu stood on the side of the ferry observation deck, worried, and the old man lost his heart as soon as the patrol envoy Chao Ping left. In fact, this old attendant is not unfamiliar with Lu Xianyang and Chen Ping'an. On the contrary, the old man was deeply impressed by the two young people in the small town. At that time, he was the official of the Ministry of Rights who visited the Liju Cave for the imperial court. At that time, he was the servant of the right, who was responsible for rubbing the monument to the archway building. Now he has only changed a word, changed from right to left, year after year. Becoming an old servant, the old man has been accounted for in that ceremonial office in his entire life. In his early years, he served as the official of the official department of Dali for a few years. It is not a promotion, but a smooth officialdom. He is regarded as a mature and respectful old man from the Beijing Rights Department. Bring the vigorous young people around, so as not to be too radical and lose sense. Later when Lu Qingfeng took office, he gave up his position. When the war ended, Dong Hu successfully won a bachelor's title, but unfortunately he was not among the 6 palaces and 6 pavilions. The old man is very familiar with what Lopeishan and Nipping Lane are. The first time I saw the 2 boys in the blacksmith shop by the river, especially Chen Pingan, he was only a black and thin boy back then. A few bags of hard-earned gold and copper coins quietly became the masters of the 5 hills to the west, but when the boy climbed out of the well with a basket of dirt on his back, he probably saw a group of officials with strange faces. He was a bit embarrassed at the time. At that time, it was very simple and honest. Therefore, it can be said that Dong Lao Shilang, who was at the center of the Dali imperial court, was watching how the boy in Ni Ping Alley bought the mountain step by step with a few bags of gold and copper, and leased it to the Saint Wanqiong, and how he played chess. Dun Shan Weibo got acquainted, and finally chose Luopa Mountain as the ancestor mountain. He founded the mountain and established a school. With the new Jiaoshan ferry, the young mountain owner went on a few long trips, constantly buying more mountains and attracting more people to the mountain. Therefore, the old man is now worried about his own situation and is a little gloating. Before Xingyang Mountain was listed as the head of the sect, it was another colleague of the Ministry of Rites who had worked together for many years and was responsible for presiding over the ceremony. Last time, Qingfeng City was just a servant of the Ministry of Rituals of the Dali capital. Either the Shang Shu from the Ministry of Rites at the Accompany capital came forward, or it should be him. As a result, on the side of Luopa Mountain, he ignored the Dali imperial court, so the right servant of the Ministry of Rites, a former protégé, had to call him a little who taught him to laugh at himself at the wine table. Dong Hu planned to wait and see again, wait for the Zhengyangshan Council to discuss a result, and wait for Chen Pingan to finish asking the sword before making a decision. As for certain hints of the Empress Dowager Dali, and certain explicit statements of the Yuan family in the Shangzhou kingdom, they can be taken seriously or not. If the Beiju Luzhou, the neighbor to the north, is the continent most qualified to be arrogant among the vast 9 continents, and Tonghishao, which was once south, is the one with the deepest and deepest heritage, then in that battle before, the mountains and rivers were the smallest and the most pitiful in Aquarius. It was a small place that couldn't be built in a nest. The mountains were low and the water was shallow. I wanted to be scolded by monks from other continents. Can't do it. Therefore, Aquarius is the least concerned about the situation on the mountains of other continents, and the least being taken seriously by the monks of other continents. Of course, today is different from the past. The cultivators have a high-sightedness and a big tone. A long line of spectators, men, women and children, but all of them are the genealogy masters on the mountain. At the moment, they are all on the railing to watch the excitement. Someone sneered, whispered a little bit, and spoke fair words, saying that this fallen mountain is just a domineering generation, so aggressive and domineering, how can it last for a while? Maybe after a while, the situation will be turned upside down, and the sword tops will be sacrificed by the Zhengyang Mountain. 2 sword lights flashed. What kind of young sword fairy, even if it is not dead, will fall out of the peak? Friends on the side laughed, but they didn't. They showed up one by one and didn't know where they came from. Self-registration number, as a canteen buddy, tell us the name of the dish. Someone was curious to ask, is there such a mountain near the New Jiaoshan ferry on the edge of Luopa Mountain, Beiyue Piyin Mountain? But there is already Wei Shanjin's Piyin Mountain, and Ruan Shengren's Longhuan Jianzong. How could it be possible to accommodate such a huge Xianjie mountain? Someone nodded in agreement, agreeing, saying that according to common sense, the old Lizhu cave took root and was reduced to the rank of blessed land, supporting a Kendo sect. How could it run out of landscape heritage? Probably it's meaningless to chat like this. Cui Dongshan said, I'm thinking, in the future, when we order other sects of Shanshui Mansion newspaper, whether we will be diligent and thrifty, and we will only buy 1 copy on the mountain, or whether everyone is rich and wealthy, each one will buy one for each. Jiang Shangzhen wanted to laugh at first, but the more he thought about it, the more he couldn't laugh. Cui Dongshan smiled and said, how? Is it true that finding such a small matter is the real problem? Jiang Shangzhen curiously asked, is there an answer? Have. What's the solution? Look what Mr. means. Jiang Shangzhen really laughed out loud this time, and gave a thumbs up to the white-clothed boy in the distance, so he was a proud disciple. Jiang Shangzhen learned from that young mountain lord, with his hands in sleeves. I don't know if he can do something today, otherwise, how can he sit firmly in the top seat of worship? Ordinary people, night wanderers with candles, precarious wind and rain, muddy roads, what you need most is not straw shoes, but an umbrella. Cui Dongshan turned his head and found the little girl with sweat oozing from her forehead. She looked serious and unknowingly, frowning with 2 pale yellow eyebrows. Cui Dongshan's eyes were gentle, and he smiled. Xiaomi Li, what's wrong, homesick? The little girl in black laughed, pulled the sleeve of the big white goose, and squeezed the walking stick in her hand. The millet grains were stern, trying to make herself look higher than the Dongfu, but quietly said to Cui Dongshan, little brother, I'm a little nervous. Cui Dongshan hurriedly put Chief Zhou aside, and smiled with Xiaomi Li. What are you nervous about? There is a little brother and a big sister. Besides, you don't need to fight, let's the right guardian of Luopashan deal with this. Help the young man, isn't the overkill. In a moment, you will take the trekking stick and be responsible for dispatching troops, where to fight, not to say anything else. Anyway, you'll just listen to your platoons with Chief Zhou. Lay out. Millet scratched his face, but I haven't read the military book. Cui Dongshan stretched out his hand and rubbed the head of the millet grain, but she raised his hand and moved it away. Cui Dongshan put it on her head again, and was slapped off by her. When he reached out again, the millet grain turned his head and stared. Why? Well, be careful of you. Cui Dongshan smiled and put his hands away. The woman from the Su family in Qingfeng City, who was left in the mountains, looked up and stared at the lord of the fox country. The woman gritted her teeth, hated her, and said something in her heart, Pei Xiang, a bitch, you still have it today. Show your face. What? Did you hook up with the shopkeeper Yan Fong, or sneak up on the big bed with mud legs? Who seduced whom? Ning Yao, who was far away from Bailudu, raised his eyebrows because he noticed the woman's voice. Just ears and eyes, all the alleys, next to the Long Jing well, under the old locust trees, between the ridges of the Long Yao fields, and the wall between the door and the door, where is not the martial arts field for sharpening your mouth. The female patriarch, who wore a golden silk crown and emerald green robe, was really trembling with anger by Lu Xianyang's generous words. The white-clothed old ape took a step forward and said with a calm expression, There is still half a stick of incense, you continue to talk. I will go to see the muddy legs that are so ambitious for a while. Lu Xianyang raised the wine glass with one hand and thumbs up with the other. Lao Zhu Yuan is invincible. He once changed his fist in Song Changjing, kicked Piyin Mountain, and smashed countless ancestral homes of each family. The Chao family's ancestral home in Mud Bottle Lane, Erlang Lane, the Yuan family, the Leaf family in the far west, and the Xia family in Taoya Lane, are all invincible. Who would dare to settle accounts with the ancestor who moved to the mountain, Chioho? Now that they have broken the border, dealing with Qin Pingan is not easy. The ancestors of the peaks of Xingyang Mountain, as well as a group of worshippers, are all horrified. How many powers did this guardian enshrine when he traveled to the sky of Lizhu Cave? It is no wonder that Chao Jun, who claims to be from Ni Ping Alley, will ask Jian Qiangzifeng and Bei Jianfeng one after another. And that Dolly patrolling envoy Chao Ping. The two ancestors of Yuan and Chao came from the sky of Lizhu Cave. They complemented each other by helping the Song family of Dolly rise in the north and gain a firm foothold so as not to be annexed by the Lu dynasty. In the end, they have the awe-inspiring vision of today's Dolly Iron Cavalry. This is a fact known to all continents. Emperor Bamboo smiled and said, Lu Jianxian, stop joking. These few words of Lu Xianyang are of course nonsense, but at this moment, who is not suspicious, and a few words are tantamount to adding fuel to the fire and making things worse. Xingyang Mountain cannot withstand such a toss. Behind the guardian mountain enshrining Yuanjinye, an old ape figure appeared, stomping heavily, setting foot between the top of the sword and the Dingjian pavilion, and at the same time running the magical powers of moving the mountain together, stepping down the first line of peaks and crashing to the ground. The surrounding mountains, waters, and air lock will then be firmly integrated. The little humble species in Ni Ping Alley dared to cut open the Zhu mountain, and then raised a line of peaks with a sword, causing the Zhu mountain to be several feet high from the ground. This magical power of stepping on the mountains to take root, shaking so much that it can be called domineering, making many Kuching worship capitals feel worried. Will they fall to one side with the bamboo emperor, and if they are not careful, they will make the wrong bet? I heard that your kid has liked to pray to God and worship Buddha since he was a child. Chen Pingon just stretched out his palm and blocked the punch casually. A sword immortal in a green shirt and an old ape in white. On the way the two sides fell, the summer lake was completely empty. They landed on the shore and rushed in all directions, down the mountain along the full moon peak. The mountain climbing shrine on Full Moon Peak is like a stream with steps as a riverbed, clacking towards the foot of the mountain. The descendants of this peak near the Shaoshu Lake, and the monks who watched the ceremony were in a hurry. They had to rely on their own means to resist the overwhelming waves that hit the shore and lifted into the sky. The most troublesome part is that it contains the scents of fish and covers the sky with the lake. The sun was unstoppable, so that many monks' spells were shattered, and their natal creatures were beaten up like duckweeds, and the Taoist heart was unstable, and they quickly put them away as soon as they were sacrificed. The immortal fights, the vulgar child suffers. Below the top of the mountain, all the air trainers who are not earth immortals are different from the ordinary masters in the market below the mountain. Everyone was horrified. The old ancestor who moved to the mountain had 1,000 years of time just serving as the enshrinement of Xingyang Mountain. Then the years of living in the mountain and cultivating the Taoism will only be longer. With this method, if it is still a bit more, the truth can be said, but the young sword fairy who was born in the sky, who was about the same age as Lu Xianying, was born to death. Where did this cultivation background come from? The 10 young and alternate candidates selected by Aquarius Island, Xinhua Mountain, Ma Kuxuan's cultivation roots and talents, Jiang Yun and Lu Bakio's teachings, Xia Ling's family background and blessings, no matter how they rise, there will be traces to follow. The Shaoshu Lake is not only empty, but even the muddy bottom of the lake is scattered, and the roots of the Full Moon Peak underwater are exposed. It came to light, but so. This kind of scene was created, but the white monkey handed his fist, Qing Shan received his fist, and just took a punch. Chen Pingon stood on the bluestone that was slightly moisturized, and the bluestone kept cracking under his feet, and the bottom of the summer lake was like a cobweb. Chen Pingon raised his hand and used the water method to re-enter the lake. The old ape in white stood on the shore, his face as usual. After counting the punches, a mouthful of pure innocence, the qi went through the mountains and rivers, still not exhausted. Xia Yuansue said with his heartfelt words to several nephews and nephews around him, "Senior nephew Tao, my Full Moon Peak is nothing but some broken stones, but your chilling mountain is a good summer lake. It is difficult to repair because of this storm." Smashed at that Qing Shan sword fairy. The ferocious outburst of the old mountain-moving ape uprooted 2 tributary mountain peaks, clenched one in one hand, and smashed at the little bunny. The majestic face of the old ape stepped across the mountains and rivers, stepped on the top of a broken mountain in a small southern country in the past, and looked ahead. Chen Pingans joined together to make a sword cut, split the Yujiafeng mountain in the center, waved his sleeve with his left hand, and smashed the mountain back intact, and then tapped twice with both fingers to directly smash the 2 tribal hills. Set in the air. A green shirt floated slowly on the top of Qingwu Peak. Pei Qian hurriedly landed and stood beside the master, otherwise it would be outrageous. Chen Pingon smiled and said, "It's okay. The old beast didn't have enough food today." He fished it softly. He stretched a little away and left the mountain indiscriminately. The catkins were shaken. It was far less powerful than our millet grains and melon seeds. The little girl in black smiled from ear to ear, holding the hiking stick in her arms, and quickly raised her hands to block her mouth. Her faint eyebrows and squinted eyes made the table happy. How can she be so powerful, so good? What a good person! Mountain Master is talking nonsense. Don't believe any of you, but if you really want to believe it, I will let you not believe it. Cui Dongshan grinned and said, the right guardian does not need to shoot today. It is already famous. Xiaomi Lian laughed and said, void names are false names. Chen Pingan said to Pei Qian again in his heartfelt voice, staring at the Yishan Peak, whoever dares to appear, you will fight back. Pei Qian nodded, I see. Chen Pingan stepped on the ground lightly, and his figure instantly left Qingwu Peak, silently. Compared to the veritable pull-up of the white-clothed old ape, he was indeed without momentum at all. Wearing a blue shirt, he passed the two hills that seemed to have been subjected to the fixation technique, dragged the mountains, and faced the old ape who stepped on the mountains far away. The remaining half-stick incense is about to end. Chen Pingan laughed with a heartfelt smile. Don't worry, at least Tao Zi will definitely take action on the Yishan Peak. I remember the first time I saw it on Falu Street. I knew she was a smart person since she was a child, but Yuan, if you go through the mountains and rivers with such an invincible posture, how can she fight for you? 3 punches, and the last 3 punches, Yuan Laozu carefully weighed, whether to continue to let the layman watch the excitement, or let the expert watch the doorway. I am free. After speaking, he dragged the 2 mountains and threw them to 2 places respectively, serving as the tip of the mountain tops of Yunfeng Domain and Yujiao Peak. Chen Pingan also has a pair of golden eyes, but it is far more rich and refined than Yuan Jinier, and sneered, why, I have to say that I am Zhu Wei, so that you can recognize your ancestors. Yuan Jinier said sternly. They continued to laugh. After a punch, the jade and the stone were burned. Remember to reincarnate in the next life and find a good place. Chen Pingan hooked his finger. Come, please beat me to death. The half-stick of incense has passed, so I can give you another chance to punch. Cui Dongshan endured, but still couldn't hold it back, and laughed. Jiang Shangzhen was also helpless, looking for someone to compete with the exhaustion of luck and the suppression of the avenue, and don't look for our young mountain master who was targeted by the Howren and the wild. As for the old ancestor who moved to the mountain, there is no need to worry about it, anyway, it will shut up completely soon. Jiang Shangzhen asked heartily, the victory of the 2 worlds is clearly still there. Why doesn't it seem so obvious? Did you find some way to crack it? Cui Dongshan said, Mister, I just really wanted to understand a Buddhist saying, he wants to cross all beings, and it is for all beings. That's why he can take advantage of the trend and enter a certain state. Always get lost in the law, and chances are not hindered by the law. Mister has this heart first, and then has this state. Jiang Shangzhen nodded and said, awesome. However, Jiang Shangzhen knew very well that Cui Dongshan just put it lightly, and Chen Pingan would definitely be a physical and mental suffering when he did it. Cui Dongshan rolled his eyes and said, nonsense. At the top of the sword, Lu Xianyang shook the empty hip flask in his hand and threw it out of the white jade railing. He hugged the back of his head with both hands, and his hatred and grudges were all going on. Outside the Luopa Mountain Bamboo House, there is no Jingua Shuiyu of Xingyang Mountain, but it does not matter, there is still Chief Zhou's method. Chao Qingqing, among them, held a handful of melon seeds, all of which were left behind before going down the mountain. Sister Wanchu helped to hand them over. Wei Bo left Piyin Mountain and quietly appeared here. The hidden Yuaning Jianxiu Cui Wei also appeared and said hello softly, Mr. Wei Shan. Wei Bo smiled and nodded, thank you. Cui Wei was speechless for a while. I am dedicated to the Patriarch Hall of Ji Se Peak, staring at the top of my mountain, what hard work. Wei Bo seemed to feel that there was something wrong with what he said. He laughed at himself, this habit must be changed. Before touring Hongzhou town, which borders the Three Rivers, at the bookstore, the of Waterloo Jean would jokingly say that he is the Mountain King of Aquarius Island and the Mountain of Jisa Peak. Wei Bo thought it made sense, and Li Shuishan's words were very funny. Who is the official boss and who is the subordinate? So I took dozens of books from the bookstore. On the table, today, the incense little man from the Ziqinghuang temple who just came to Luopa Dianmao, is diligent and conscientious, and is responsible for helping to gather the melon seeds and pile them into mountains. Seeing that Wei Shanjun, there is no Chenling Jun around him. The little guy who once helped Wei Shanjun to make the nickname everywhere, he squatted behind the hill. As long as I didn't see Wei Yao didn't see me. The private mountains and rivers in the area of Xingyang Mountain are thousands of miles away. After Yuan Zhenye showed his true body, even the people in the market, everyone can see the huge figure enshrined by the mountain guard. As for the monks watching the ceremony, I really don't understand how the Qingshan sword fairy from Luopa Mountain could get punch after punch under the hands of this old ape. Patriarch Xia Yuansui suddenly said in his heart, "Nephew, your choice seems ruthless, but in fact it is wise. If you change it to me to decide, maybe you can't be as decisive as you." No matter what, the next sect master, without Qiu Lingshan to fight, the full moon peak's descendant sword repair, there is greater hope to provoke this burden. Yen Chu nodded and said, "The two evils are the lesser of the power." Looking back, the suzerain's move did not make the least bit of muddle, which is really impressive. Only Tao Yanbo was dull and speechless. From now on, how should his Qiu Lingshan deal with himself? Among the peaks of Xingyang Mountain where the hearts of the people are dissipated, Qiu Lingshan has a line of sword repair, but can there be a foothold? No longer was Yuan Zhenye, who was enshrined by a mountain protector, in the form of a real white ape. Towards the top of his head, he gave birth to the highest level of Dao Fa and the highest level of fist intent. Before the old ape punched, he laughed loudly, "Death is death. Don't want the old man to beg for mercy with you." How about the outcome? Yuan Zhenye, who kept throwing punches in half a stick of incense, would really have no idea. Yuan Zhenye handed out that punch, and a circle of golden ripples appeared in the sky, spreading rapidly in all directions, and the entire Xingyang mountain boundary seemed to have a layer of magnificent golden waves slowly passing by. The arm that the old ape threw a fist was like a mountain range and the ground was cracked, all broken, and the heavy rain splashed wildly. The old ape was still in the air, still maintaining that forward posture, but the small world a few miles around the blue shirt was still the sun, the moon and the stars, in an orderly manner, and the avenues flowed endlessly. The old ape with one broken arm had his shoulders slightly tilted, just touching the edge of the small world, where the avenues intersect, the stars are splashing, and the sky is full of fire and rain. Chen Pingan said, "Then change me." The vision of heaven and earth suddenly converged, and the martial arts of 10 realms, returning to the first level. Boxing is swordsmanship, like a swordsmanship that had fallen to the world 10,000 years ago. A huge vortex appeared at the sky, and there was a golden sword light that seemed to be cruising in the long river of time for thousands of years. It broke through the air and hit the head of the old ape's body, hitting Yuan Zhenye directly. The land of Yangshan, facing the ground, just hit the peak of the sword on the back of the fairy. The light of the sword fell straight and lasted for a long time, like a golden long sword that invisibly connected the sky and the earth. After piercing the head of the old ape, it was inserted diagonally into the ground. Yuan Zhenye prostrated on the ground, roaring, resting his hands on the ground, trying to lift his head as hard as he could, struggling to get up. Then the shirt in the blue shirt was straight and standing on its head, causing Yuan Zhen's page door to hang down instantly. Not close to the back Jianfeng. Chen Pingan raised his arm high, 5 thunderstorms in his palm, like a robbery, a swift press, hitting Yuan Zhenyi's neck. With his left arm, the long sword on that line of Fengshan Gate archway swims at night, turning into a rainbow, wearing a blue shirt, holding a long sword, dragging the sword away, walking slowly at the neck of the old ape, the sword is light swipe across. In the end, he cut off a huge head of Yuanjinye and let it roll to the foot of the mountain. In a sleeve, Fu Lu kept flying out like a long river, smashing Yuan Zini's headless body. The head was at the foot of the mountain, and his eyes were still staring at the blue shirt on the top of the mountain, and his eyes were gradually distracting. I don't know if it is dead or unwilling, and I don't want to close it. Chen Pingan nodded towards it. For some reason, Yuan Jinye seemed to understand the meaning of the old boy in Nipping Lane. He nodded slightly and finally closed his eyes. It was exactly the same choice as the ghost nun Situwaning of the Full Moon Peak. He chose to be a remnant of the Jade Realm. The rime of Taoism and the only remaining Qi luck are all left and given to this Xingyang mountain. The old ape, who could have chosen to blow up the golden core and the nascent soul, had only one thought in his lifetime, as if he was talking to the man on the top of the mountain: I beg you, don't kill Tao Zi. And that blue shirt, like an unknown prophet, nodded at the time, saying, I am not you. Yuan Zini's soul dissipated, and an old man in white clothes with a vague body shape was faintly visible, standing beside his head at the foot of the mountain. His last word in this life was to raise his head, look at the young man, and ask in his heart, kill me, who is it? Chen Ping didn't answer, only waved his sleeves to disperse his soul. Night Tour returns to the sheath, with his back behind. Lifting one foot, stomping heavily on the ground, the whole hill under his feet split in 4 or 5. There are no immortals carrying the sword peak in the world, only tourists in Qingshan carrying the sword. On the avenue, visitors at Bingshuai are not afraid of encountering ghosts, they are afraid of talents. In addition to the people watching the ceremony in Luopa Mountain, all the sword immortals and disciples of Xingyang Mountain, as well as all the guests staying in the old and new peaks, felt a strange sense of suffocation at this moment. It was as if everyone was standing beside him at the moment, a sword fairy from Luopa Mountain. In that blue shirt, Yufeng came to the top of the sword where he lost a patriarch hole. As the Lord of Xingyang Mountain, Emperor Bamboo immediately held his fist and respected, Xingyang Mountain Bamboo Emperor, pay respect to Lord Qin Shan. Lu Xianyang rolled his eyes and glanced at Qin Pingan. Lu Xianyang took the lead in Yufeng to leave, looked around, saw the round-faced girl standing among the reeds, and rushed to Egret Crossing immediately. Chen Pingan looked around, did not say much, followed Lu Xianyang to Yufeng and left. During this time, he turned his head and smiled brightly with Bailudu, then came to the white-clothed boy and the black-clothed girl, rubbed the heads of the millet grains, and laughed softly. Said, go home. Sort of Coming Chapter 825. A dragon boat ferry named Fanmo, at the edge of Xingyang Mountain, withdrew its blindfolds and slowly returned north. On the side of the ferry, everyone in Luopashan fell into shape. Only Sui did not board the ship on the right, so she chose to travel far away with Yujin alone. Hong Xia and Pei Xiang are still standing together. A successful walker of the Huajiao, a master of the Fox Country, both of Shanzi spirits, and now they are practicing in the Lotus Root blessed land, and every time Ji Sifeng discusses matters, always feeling out of place, so it seems that the two sides are very dependent on each other. Even if there is nothing to talk about, they will stand together involuntarily. As for the previous opportunity of Paixiang's breakthrough, everyone saw it, and no one took it seriously. Even Pei Xiang herself didn't think there was anything worth talking about. After all, even if she was in the Yupu realm tomorrow, how can it be? Zhu Lian's stature is rickety, with his hands folded, he is chatting and laughing with the master in autumn. Xiaomili holding a trekking stick, flying around Pei Qian, twittering, talking about her while hovering in the wind with her little brother, she is similar to a radish camped in the field, not moving, and stable. From beginning to end, there is absolutely no tension of drizzle size. Chen Lingjun again began to exert some mysterious natal magic powers, and the old Jian Xiao, who was alias to the upside-down Jade Pu realm, became brother and brother. One said that he was very good at eating in Beiyue land boundary and Beiju Luzhou. He reported his name, and he didn't have to spend money on drinking. The one who said that he was in Lixiazu and Niazhao was not well known, but he was inevitably inferior to his brother Jingqing. As for the lady of the mountain lord who has not yet been married by her own master, when Chen Lingjun boarded the ship in Ningyao, she was a little far away, just a few gliding steps, like a fish swimming through the crowd, clasping fists in both hands, respectful. After a tick to the end, his was so high that he was about to speak, but he was beaten by Cui Dongshan. He fell a dog to eat on the spot and lay down on the ground. Chen Lingjun was completely dead and shouted, "Jing Qing pays homage to Mrs. Shanju." Ning Yao helplessly said, "Get up and talk." Chen Lingjun blurted out, "If you return to Mrs. Shanju, it will be cool on the ground. The man has gold under his knees, and the more he kneels, the more it is." In the early years, when Pei Qian was in front of the jewels at the gate of Ningfa's house on the Great Wall of Jinqi, Ning Yao could barely adapt to the style of Luopa Mountain. In fact, on Chen Pingan's side, she had heard many stories about this boy in Xingyi. Jingyang Mountain must return the gift and compensation afterwards. Ling Qi, the master of Qiangzaifeng Peak, received the instruction from the suzerain, so that the Hua Mufang female cultivators who had turned pale, quickly removed all cases. Emperor Bamboo closed his gaze, and said with his heartfelt voice to all the peak masters, "No one should block the guests who leave Jingyang Mountain. There must be no dissatisfaction, no offensive words, just pretend to be given to me. Pretend to be a smiling face, Yan Zhanglu, you send someone to Zhufeng Mountain and stare at all the people who send off guests. Once you find that offenders will be eliminated on the spot, if there are guests willing to stay in Jingyang Mountain, you will send someone to treat him well, keeping in mind this incense, friendship in adversity, but so, you must cherish it." The Emperor Bamboo performed the supernatural powers of the envisioning Qi technique, watching the weather in the mountains beyond the first-line peaks, was scribbled, and his vitality was greatly hurt, but the Emperor Bamboo was still not discouraged by this, but still in the mood, and the old swords around him who had their own minds. The fairy joked, "Unfortunately, the celebration has not yet started, so Chen Shanju and Lu Jianxian each climbed the mountain and asked about the sword. Otherwise, we will receive the gift, how many holes can be made up, and then the landscape will be repaired, so as not to tear down the east wall and repair the west wall. It's so overwhelmed that I have to embezzle money from the funds for the next site selection." Xia Yuan Chui ran with a long sigh. This teacher-nephew really has a good temperament. Even now, his words can still be so calm and gentle. The full-moon peak ancestor with the highest standing in Jingyang Mountain, for a while, he suddenly lost his thoughts. The enemy is gone. If the Luopa Mountain can really stop here, will the full-moon peak and the first-line peak of the Bamboo Emperor abandon their premonitions and cooperate sincerely? The god of wealth, Tao Yanbo, hesitated to speak but stopped. Yan Chu's face was full of surprises that couldn't be concealed, because the words of the Emperor Zhu were a smile with him, not with the of wealth in Qiulingshan. Obviously, the original scenery of Qiuling Mountain is destined to decline. The tree fell down and scattered, and people walked to cool tea. There are very few guests left. One after another, the ritual ferry boats are like flying birds in the mountains, and along the trajectory that looks like a bird road, they swept the sky and traveled far. Jingyang Mountain is a place of right and wrong, and you cannot stay for long. The Emperor Bamboo sternly said, "Just take this opportunity to take advantage of this moment to enshrine the crowds of Kiqing, and we will have the second meeting." The Emperor Zhu turned his head and smiled at the female ancestor of Zufeng, and said, "Tianwan, your responsibilities remain the same, and you still have 3 yuan, Jingguo Shuiyu, Shanshui Dibao, Shanmen intelligence. Tianwan looked flustered and said in a trembled voice, "Sect Master, it is precisely because of the mistake of Zhufeng's spy that we take the two young people lightly. Tianwan is hard to redeem, and is willing to think about it like Tao Master." Emperor Bamboo smiled, shook his head, and refused Tianwan's resignation. Of course he knew this girl, something was wrong. The Emperor Bamboo even determined that she and Luopa Mountain were either extremely related to each other or reached a certain covenant, but there was no way. This was the price Xingyang Mountain had to pay. It was Yixianfeng and his Bamboo Emperor who had to go with that Qin Mountain. The sincerity of the Lord's hands. Yan Chu's heartstrings tightened in an instant, and he didn't dare to care about what he was doing or not. After all, Shuilong Peak is the mountain that has always held the power of spy. Tianwan, this stinky lady, who can't open which pot to mention. As for Zufeng, don't talk about the progeny, usually there is not even a handyman disciple, and only Tianwan has always been there to practice in secluded residence. It is not clear that this is to pour dirty water on Shulongfeng. The Emperor Bamboo's mood is complicated. The sovereign's state of mind is far less calm than on the surface. In fact, he is already exhausted. If there is a little bit of trouble, the Emperor Bamboo will feel that it is difficult to support a single tree. The truth is revealed, the hearts of the people are revealed, and the views are unobstructed. There is no need to look at the bewilderment and trepidation of the ancestors of the peaks on the Tingjian Pavilion, only to say that on the top of the sword, there are not stupid wine bags and rice bags, or clever people with ghosts, or they are just sitting on the sidelines and choosing the clever grass. Emperor Bamboo smiled bitterly for no reason. Could it be that the old saying goes well, the family does not enter the house? The Bamboo Emperor's field of vision quickly passed everywhere, trying to find the person's trace. Emperor Bamboo dared to assert that that person must be somewhere in the mountain at this moment. In the viewing pavilion built next to the cliff on Full Moon Peak, the two brothers and sisters of the Yunlin Jiang family remained. The plaque is a solitary cloud pavilion with gold characters on a black background. Open the door in the morning, and the mountains are covered with snow, watching the wind and the pine trees of the cranes, the years are thrown away. The heart and the moon are originally round. In the evening, the drunken dream falls into the woods, the gentleman's daylight ascends the way, the flowers and trees are for true appreciation, the incense is burned to listen to the rain. Jiang Xing said angrily, "Come back." Jiang Shan, who rarely drinks, took out a jug of wine, took a sip, leaned against the pavilion, and looked at the Yixian Peak. In the eyes of outsiders, it is infighting. But in the eyes of Xingyang Mountain, it is natural. Each has its own contention, the outer sects are competing for personal status, the direct legends are competing for the rankings of the peaks, and they are competing for the sword-making needs of the heavens, materials and treasures. There is no distinction between fame and fortune. It is not easy to walk on the road contending. It will only compete more fiercely than before, because I suddenly discovered that Xingyang Mountain, which was invincible on a continent in my mind, is not a potential replacement for the existence of the gods. Even if the frontline peak ancestors are rebuilt, it seems that they will meet every day. It's in danger, and am worried that one day it will be gone. Jiang Shan carried the wine flask, raised his arm, and drew a big circle. In the past, Xingyang Mountain could continuously expand, so that many hidden dangers hidden in the depths can be ignored temporarily, or even have the opportunity to remain ignored. Then Jiang Shan drew a small circle the size of a palm. It seems to be reduced to such a small site now. In the end, Jiang Shan drew another circle between the big circle and the small circle with the hip flask in his hand. Although it is actually so big, people will not be so optimistic. Going to extremes, from the once blind optimism, the eyes are above the top. I feel that the mountains and rivers of the whole continent are the gates of the monks of Mount Jingyang. They have become blind and pessimistic as they are today, and there is no more sorrow, so I had to stare at the 1 acre 3/4 a few steps away from my toes. Jiangxing frowned. Just listening to you, it's already so complicated, isn't it even more exaggerated to do it? Jiang Shan smiled and said, it's not complicated to do it. I'm an outsider, so I don't want to comment casually, but I just say it, really not complicated. In short, Chen Pingan's questioning sword did not end there, but just started. In the next verse questioning the sword, Jiang Shan guessed that the place where the sword immortal of the Qingshan sword fell in Luopa Mountain was chosen by the master of Xingyang Mountain. Jiangxing complained, just listening, it will annoy me. Condescending, outlines and controls, it will be solved easily, and it will happen naturally. Jiang Shan pointed to the meandering water named Yanji Creek on the ground outside the cliff, and smiled. Since Luopa Mountain has helped Xingyang Mountain to carve a riverbed, then people's hearts will flow like water from now on, and they will naturally flow through it. People step into it without realizing it. Jiang Shan got up suddenly, got up again with the steps of the pavilion, and asked with a smile, Master Qin, I don't know if I have such a simple opinion, is there anything wrong? Chen Pingan, who had gone back and returned with a smile, said, it's all right, there is no major omission. But it is far less mysterious and lofty than Jiang Junzi said. In my opinion, the foundation of the world's knowledge is only the word patient. Jiang Shan pondered for a moment, then smiled and nodded. Chen Shanzhu has unique insights, and it is indeed more concise than what I said, in one sentence. Chen Pingan knew that this person was waiting for him. Then come and meet the future patriarch of Yunlin Jiang's family. Jiangxing was horrified, turned his head abruptly, and saw an unexpected guest who was returning. Xingyang Mountain has really fallen into blood mold for 8 lifetimes, and it has been exposed to such a lingering ghost. I saw the man smiling slowly as he walked up the steps. The young mountain lord of the fallen mountain, the last hermit of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, changed his costume and wore a crown of lotus flowers that transgressed the Taoist tradition. Qingsha Dao robe, foot on the cloud shoes, holding a white jade Ganoderma in the hand, the spirit of the ethereal cloud and water body, the so-called fairy-style Dao bones in the Shanxue Jiguai and mysterious novels, but so. Sitting in the pavilions, Jiang Shan smiled and asked, Master Qin, would it be better if you didn't kill Yuan Jinye? Chen Pingan said, just talking about the results will be better, but you can't do things just because the final result is right. You can use any means in many links to manipulate people's hearts, and play with people's hearts, even if the results are the same. But there are some differences. It is a world of difference in my heart. What does Mr. Zhang think? Not killing Yuan Jinye left Xingyang Mountain a great accident. In fact, Chen Pingan could indeed do this, even without knowing it. At the time, he sacrificed a cage on the back of Jianfeng. The bird is fine. Jiang Shan nodded and said solemnly, yes. Chen Pingan smiled and handed over a pot of Qingshan wine brewed in his own wine shop. It's not a good wine, and the price is not expensive, but I don't have much inventory here, and I drink a pot less than a pot. Jiang Shan thanked him, took the hip flask, took a sip, took another sip, and finally said, it seems like a taste. Chen Pingan said seriously, that must be because Junzi Jiang drank less. Jiang Shan changed the subject, Lord Qin Shan, why didn't Yuan Zini's past resumes behave tyrannically and indiscriminately killing innocent people, and then tell a continent today? In this way, there will always be less unclear truth. Infamy on the Mountain. Sword of Coming Chapter 826. Chen Pingan got up and came to the railing, facing the person on the side of Bailudu, gently waving the white jade Ganoderma in his hand. Lu Jimao, the true monarch of Zhejiang, who returned to Bailudu, took a closer look and saw the accountant of his own Qingsha Island in the past. He was dressed in a presumptuous Taoist costume. However, it is estimated that God Sect Chi Tianjun saw it with his own eyes, and now he only opens close one eye. Lu Jimao let out a big laugh. Yu Feng came to Guiyun Tower, and fell, clasped his fist and said, Chen Shan's question of the sword this time makes people fascinated. Chen Pingan put away the white jade Ganoderma lucidum into his sleeve, smiled and clasped his fists in return. I have seen Lu Zhenjuan. It turned out that the flying sword of the previous line of peaks, like 100 flowers dazzling all the peaks, Lu Jimao got a secret letter from Chen Pingan, saying that after the question of the sword was over, he was asked to rush to the Eager Crossing to discuss something. Chen Pingan handed over a pot of Qingshanshan wine, and said straight to the point, I plan to make a statement with Xingyang Mountain and recommend Lu Zhenjuan as the sect master of Xingyang Mountain. It's just that people are not as good as the sky, and things have changed in the middle, so I had to let Lu Zhenjuan go for nothing. Up. Lu Jimao took the hip flask and did not rush to open the mud seal to drink. God knows it is a toast and fine wine. Besides, it sounds like falling clouds. What is this all about? I am enshrined by the chief of Zhenjingzong. On the golden jade genealogy enshrined in Yugue Zongzu Shirtang, the names are very high, and they are the lord of Xingyang Shanxia sect. Mr. Accountant has a good calculation. But let Lu Jimao make his own choice, or some choices. For example, on the premise that Jiang Shangjin and Wei Ying don't hate this matter, Lu Jimao really doesn't mind pushing the boat along the river and agreed to this move. After all, it's Lu Laoqing who is always strong. Liu's body is already a fairyland, and Lu Laoer has good cultivating qualifications. As long as there is no disaster and no accidents, he can live for another 1,000 or 800 years without any problem. Furthermore, the Lord and Chief consecrate according to the unwritten rules of the mountain. Seemingly one step away, but in reality, it is thousands of miles away. Lu Laoqing was able to make an exception and promoted from worship to supreme. It was because of Sun Yuan's incense love, plus Jiang Shangzhen's old love. Wei Ying was busy returning to Tonggishao. Taking over as the supreme sect master, he didn't make a difference, or said he didn't want to lose Jiang Shangzhen's face. Therefore, the fourth suzerain in the history of Zhenjingzong, 9 out of 10, it will be the Yuguazong who will send someone over to take over Lu Laoqing in the future. Anyway, it will definitely not be Lu Jimao. This is superficial officialdom, Lu Jimao. Men Erqing. Wei Ying doesn't look down on herself too much, so much so that the Yugue Patriarch's Hall today has so many chairs empty. Lu Jimao, as the chief consecration of the next sect, still has not been able to get a place. It is so inconsistent with etiquette. What can you say? I didn't dare to complain a few words in private. Since there is no one in the court, there is no mountain and reliable, so I just confess my fate obediently. In the end, Lu Jimao was born in the Yupu realm of Shanzai Xiu. On Chen Pingan's side, he made no secret of his regret, and said with emotion, "This is not possible, it is a pity." With the help of Shi Jianhu, it becomes a genealogy enshrinement. If you can use the real-world sect to become the head of another family, this will be called Xunyuo's death and life. A Shanzui Yi Xiu who is accustomed to stray dogs digging around for food, there is nothing he dare not think, there is nothing he dare not do. Lu Jimao raised his hip flask and smiled heartily. No matter what, Chen Shan's kindness has been accepted. If you have similar good things in the future, you should be the first to think of Lu Jimao. Chen Pingan raised the hip flask, touched it lightly, nodded and smiled. I can't guarantee anything, but I can look forward to it. Lu Zimeo's eyes lit up when he heard it, even if he knew it might be this guy's nonsense, but there was some hope in the end. It was better than spending time in the real-world sect every day without seeing the slightest light. Lu Jimao took a sip of the drink and heard Chen Pingan say that this is the Qingshanshan drink produced by his shop. Ordinary mountain wines, such as Xianjia wine, you can drink it as soon as you drink it, and what else can you drink? Lu Jimao took only one sip today, and then aftertaste, frowned slightly to show respect, and then gently gnawed to show good wine. Chen Pingan lay on the railing and shook the jug gently. Lu Jimao didn't come here for a drink either. He glanced at the man next to him. For a moment, Lu Jimao felt like a world away. He couldn't believe that he was like a duckweed, and his life could only be whirled by the water. I walked here step by step and gave others wine, but others didn't dare not pick it up, and they didn't dare to say it was not good. At the gate of Qingsha Island, there are still those few account rooms. The unsuccessful big disciple Tian Hujuan, every time he goes to Qingsha Island to meet master and participate in the discussion, he dare not look at it again, his eyes will go around intentionally or unconsciously. Open the house over there. I believe that the young people of Xingyang Mountain in the future, whether it is Yujin or Yufeng, will almost be like this as long as they pass the ruins of the immortal Baek Jianfeng, with resentment hanging on their faces, and awe engraved in their hearts. A sword repairer in Jiazi who is expected to be among the Golden Corps, being the peak master of Cheongji Peak, is more than enough. Moreover, when Ling Qi was a young lady, she had an unsightly marriage with her uncle Xia Yuansue, so for so many years, Qiang Zifeng sword repaired the line and followed the footsteps of Full Moon Peak everywhere. Chen Pingan smiled and said, "No, in fact, you were right before, and there is really nothing to talk about with Xingyang Mountain." The Emperor Bamboo said, "Then I should have settled with Lord Qin Shan." Cui Dongshan rubbed his chin and said with a smile, "It's a pity that the entire Qiang Zifeng fairies are still cursing at the moment to bully others, ruining their great career in Xingyang Mountain and making them all unable to lift their heads. Come." Emperor Bamboo smiled and said, "Your husband will not care about these, because what Qin Shanju really cares about is the future Qiang Zifeng sisters who dare not shake their heads and say no words. But Qin Shanju can rest assured. The Qiang Zifeng atmosphere in the future will not make them so embarrassed." Cui Dongshan exclaimed, "Sure enough, only the enemy is the real confidant." Sect Master Zhu has reached the big jars of the spit stars of the monks of Xingyang Mountain with a few words. Cui Dongshan stepped out, his figure was radiant, and finally left Tian Wan's skin bag in place. The white-clothed boy turned his head, raised two fingers, pointed at his eyes, and signaled this half-divided woman, "You what I see and think is what I see and think. If you don't believe in evil, we will use your physique as a place to ask questions, and each will show its magic and intrigue." The Emperor Bamboo glanced at the white-clothed boy, and then at the Tianwan who seemed to be restored to her original appearance. Rao is the Emperor of the Bamboo, who must be terrified. This boy in white clothes with perverted temperament and absurd words and deeds, of course, has great skills, but the methods are really dirty. Chen Pingan took a few steps and then stopped suddenly. Bamboo Emperor's heartstrings tightened instantly. Chen Pingan turned his head and said, "Remembering a trivial matter, you have to bother Sect Master Zhu." The Emperor Bamboo said, "But it doesn't matter." Chen Pingan asked, "I don't know how far Xingyang Mountain is from Luopa Mountain." The Emperor Bamboo thought for a while, and replied, "My cultivator walks in the wind, about 200,000 miles away." Why does Lord Chen have this question? Chen Pingan narrowed his eyes and said with a smile, "Then please ask Sect Master Zhu to erect a monument on the northern boundary of Xingyang Mountain, and engrave a sentence on it, and head north to Luopa Mountain for 200,000 miles. Zhou, with this wind and kite ferry, in the future we need to open up a transcontinental route of our own, how to go by land, how to go by sea, how to deal with the passing dynasty and Xianjushan, especially with the major crossings on the road. The friendship needs to be carefully weighed, and there must be no mistakes. Dongshan and Pei Qian, you are going there to help, and you will return to Luopashan in the future. According to the previously established plan, the teacher, Miyu, Sui right, Shui Wei, you need I settled down there and practiced. The teacher helped Chao Sunny to control the general direction. Pei Qian was in charge of walking with the Qinghu Palace and Pushun thatched cottage. Dong Shan stared at the golden summit and looked at several hills. As for us, me Dajian. At this point, Chen Pingan smiled and didn't speak, and ate the seeds. Miyu quickly put down the seeds in his hand and straightened his waist. Anyway, I listened to Mr. Zhong's instructions, whether to kill someone with a sword or begging for a relationship. Are all responsible. Zhong Qiu smiled and said, don't dare to give orders to meet Cixi casually. Yu Yu was puzzled. The hidden official called you a sword immortal or a great sword immortal, and I didn't see you Miyu getting angry. Yeah, the second seat worship and bullying general worship. Chen Pingan looked towards Hongxia and said, Sui is not on the boat on the right side. Hongxia, please turn around and tell her that when you arrive at Tongyi's house, she will be responsible for the specific connection between Yuguazhang and Yunku Fudi. Hongxia immediately got up and took his orders. Chen Pingan smiled and said, next time you're still seeing this, don't leave the millet seeds. Hong sat down, a little embarrassed. Xiaomili was sitting on a tall chair swaying her feet, scratching her face. Lord, I will put melon seeds in my pocket next time. Sister Hong Xia is so talkative. Although melon seeds are not worth a bit, no one is rare, but if only Sister Hong Xia does not have melon seeds on hand, she would have no face. Chen Pingan smiled and said, then you are responsible for reminding Hongxia not to get up and talk next time. When the millet grain heard that there was a position again, he smiled from ear to ear, and nodded vigorously, okay, I will remind my sister Hongxia before every discussion. Miyu squinted at old Jianxianyu, smiling and saying, Yu Fu, you can knock on melon seeds as soon as you go to the door. It's amazing. In Lapa Mountain, this is not everyone's treatment. Yu Yu was stunned, sipping melon seeds in Luapa Mountain. Are there any particular things? Millet grains have arms around the chest, and two small brows are frowned. Could it be that the one sack of melon seeds that you buy are actually picking up treasures? In fact, the thieves are precious. In addition to the moss house in Xinghua Lane, there are also the owners of the long kiln kills in the town. In addition, it also involves the relocation of the Pingtiao from Luopa Mountain to Chidun Mountain and the reconstruction of the mountain gods. Song Yuzhang, the former superintendent of the temple. Lin Shi's father, the assistant official of the Kiln Affairs Superintendent's Construction Bureau, was a man who had gone to the officialdom of the capital city and was still invisible. He once assisted several long kiln superintendents. There is also the Qin Tianjian in Dali capital, as well as a prospective warrior, an earth teacher, and a small group of navy masters, who were responsible for the secret firing of the small town's natal porcelain. It was Ma Kuxuan's father who revealed the inside story of the porcelain, but the Ma family in Xinghua Lane will definitely not be the real master behind the scenes. Compared with a Wenjian Jingyang mountain, it is just walking along the river against the trend. In fact, the context and route are extremely simple, and there is no diversion at all. However, the matter of natal porcelain is a multitude of things, a mess, just like size. Rivers, streams, and lakes are densely networked and intricate. It's just that the situation is complicated, and Chen Pingan didn't find it difficult. Cui Dongshan asked, Sir, let's fall in love with the mountain. Next, are we going to open the door and collect disciples? Or will we talk later and continue to maintain the half-closed and half-closed state? Chen Pingan had long thought about this, and did not hesitate to say, choose the latter. At least within 30 years, unless one of you is interested in someone's qualifications, each of you will receive it as a successor, otherwise Luopashan will not charge anything. A cultivator who took the initiative to visit, no matter how good his aptitude, would not be accepted. Cui Dongshan lay on the railing, with his legs hanging off the ground, and said, We are making trouble in Jingyang Mountain. Someone will definitely come after hearing the news. Preceding disciple. Including me Dajiangxian, who is not the best preaching teacher on the mountain, all of them are thighs, just hug one, it is a great immortal fate that can be envied by the dead. In fact, as long as it is the family of Zongzong, there is no shortage of monastic embryos who take the initiative to visit the house and visit the immortals. Chen Pingon whispered, if you are willing to wait, let them wait in Longzhou, just to see how their own temperaments are. If you don't want to wait, they will go back to their respective homes. Worry is not a genealogy god. The matter of collecting disciples and incorporating them into the genealogy, the immortal family on the mountain is roughly just a few paths. The dynasty and country where the mountain is located helps select the embryonic monks in the country and send them to the mountain for practice. Either it's because of chance, there is no teacher's biography, or by chance, accidentally hitting and embarking on the path of spiritual practice, or being the bumpy mountain and wild repairs, or being cautious, going to those big immortals' houses and bumping luck. Within each sect, there will also be a group of genealogical monks who are good at inquiring the roots and looking at the air. Every few decades, they will receive an errand from the patriarch hall, ranging from several years to long. For more than 10 years or even decades, he has been sneaking under the mountain all year round, looking for good materials and beautiful jade for his martial arts. Tian Wan from Xingyang Mountain often does this kind of thing. Furthermore, the immortal masters journey down the mountain and on the way to experience, go with the fate, and do it easily. A master chooses his apprentice, and the apprentice also chooses the master. Such mountain masters often have the most reliable relationship and go longer. Cui Dongshan smiled and said, on the side of Lotus Root Land, if you let Changming stare at you, you won't be able to make any big mistakes. You don't need to be too distracted by this matter. This is the advantage of sitting on a piece of blessed land. The monks who get the moon near the water tower and go up the mountain on their own, the pure martial arts who rise in the rivers and lakes and the battlefields, and the ghosts and heroes who are expected to build an obscene temple, waiting for the orthodox edict from the imperial court. You can be promoted to the gods of mountains and waters, and you can protect the side with the right words. There will be genealogical immortals, mountains and wild repairs, ghosts and spirits, various city temples, day mountain gods, big rivers, river gods, lakes, rivers, land and land. Mother. As long as the aura of heaven and earth becomes more and more abundant, and then there are various landscape gods who perform their duties to stabilize the luck, then the circulation of a blessed land will be more flawless. Blessed land master, no matter how much fairy money and magic weapons are thrown into it, the fertilizer will still not flow into outsiders' fields. Chen Pingon whispered, although it is a blessed land of our own, we cannot be regarded as a cropland that must be planted in spring and harvested in autumn. After one crop is cut this year, we will wait for the next crop next year. Cui Dongshan nodded and said, work hard and harvest carefully. Let everyone have a choice. In fact, this is where the most basic style of Luopa Mountain lies. This unwritten rule that does not need to fall on paper will be the biggest ancestor of Luopa Mountain in the future. On the road of life, every time I dare to be angry but dare not speak, but also to bow my head to make a smile with others, it may be a jar of bitter wine, probably too much bitter wine, and finally teach people to be dull and silent, one after another, is a sea of suffering. Cui Dongshan looked into the distance, with soft eyebrows. Mr. hoped that Luopa Mountain will always be today's Luopa Mountain, and I hope Mr. Luo will always be tomorrow's Mr. Chen Pingon smiled and said, why isn't it the husband today? Cui Dongshan leaned on the railing, smiled and murmured, students believe that every husband of tomorrow will be better than every today. Chen Pingon reached out and held down the white-clothed boy's head, then raised his palms, bent his fingers, and slammed a chestnut down. You also said that the atmosphere of the Luopa Mountain is not your crookedness. In the distance, the millet grain pulled Pei Qian's sleeve, reached out his hand to block his mouth, and secretly smiled. Pei Qian, take a look, the big white goose must have said the wrong thing again. Pei Qian smiled and said, don't call the big white goose, the younger brother likes bookkeeping the most. Xiaomili laughed and said, if you are shouting, you will call the little brother if you have anything, and the big white goose if there is nothing. Pei Qian blinked, what are you talking about? Who taught you? No one taught you. You must be self-taught, right? Xiaomili said in surprise, huh? His eyes motioned to Pei Qian and gave a hint so I could answer this difficult question. Pei Qian raised his arm, bent his fingers into a chestnut shape, twisted his wrist lightly, and sighed. Xiaomili got it, and immediately shouted, I'm going to get acquainted by myself, learn by myself, no one teaches me. Cui Dongshan turned his head and smiled. Xiaomili coughed, turned around, winked at the big white goose, and glanced at Pei Qian diagonally. Cui Dongshan yelled, sister, the right guardian seems to be suggesting something to me. The millet grains hurriedly stopped between Pei Qian and de Baigo, jumped up, waved vigorously to block Pei Qian's sight, and shouted, Pei Qian, what a good deal. Big Baigo is trying to provoke a dilemma. As a result, Cui Dongshan suffered from Chen Pingan and 1 chestnut, and the millet grains suffered from Pei Qian and 1 chestnut. Both sides did not make a profit. Cui Dongshan hugged his head, turned his head and smiled, sir, in order to save money, the ferry can only go back home so slowly. Mr. is busy in advance, it is better to go to the capital faster than Yufeng. Chen Pingan nodded, feeling feasible. The Luopa mountain front line upholds the tradition of diligence, thrift and family management. So after that, I took Ningyao and left the dragon boat ferry, travel with Yufeng together. Millet Grains hugged the railing and rubbed his arms with his cheeks, and the good man Shanju was busy again. Cui Dongshan sat on the railing, moving his hips little by little. Millet, are we chatting? Xiaomili was busy thinking about things, and she complained about de Baigo's injustice, and deliberately didn't go to see Cui Dongshan. She just smiled and said, who are you? De Baigo I know is generous, little brother is amazing, someone is a little bit it's not like him. A melon seed is so small and not like him. Cui Dongshan leaned back, turned upside down, fell to the ground, and hugged the railing with the millet grains. Pei Qian hesitated for a while, and asked some things about the Queen Mother. Back then, Pei Qian had heard of it when he was on the battlefield with the capital. Cui Dongshan smiled and said that there is nothing to talk about, just a woman who clings to an acre of land and scratches whoever he sees. Xiaomili is not interested in these, and I can't remember it. Before, when Pei Qian was only a little taller than himself, it was fun to patrol the bandits together every day. Go and ask the old cook for a few pieces of cloth, learn from the heroine costume in the romance novel, let Sister Wanchu help cut into a cloak, one holding a green bamboo stick, the other holding a golden pole, all the way through the Wuthering Mountains forest, as long as they run fast enough for the cloak to fly. Every time there is heavy snow in the Luopa mountain, Pei Qian makes her stand still and become a big snowman. Sister Wanchu either waits under the eaves with a charcoal cage, or prepares the stove in the house. She is big water monster. There was another time Pei Qian pulled her, and the two hid in the corner. They had made an appointment in advance to let the old cook learn about the most powerful hidden weapon in the world. In the end, she stood still, nodded, Pei Qian stretched out her hands, slapped her, grabbed her face, then staggered, spinning one by one, turning to the middle of the road, just to throw her out. The old cook she had some real skills, and she barely blocked her. After she was placed on the ground, the old cook was still frightened. He kept moving back, punching out his hands indiscriminately, and finally stood still. It was hard to see the truth, old cook. The old face blushed and said angrily about this kind of hidden weapon. I traveled all over the rivers and lakes and rummaged through the novels. It was still unheard of. I was caught off guard, and I was really caught off guard. Whenever there is a thunderstorm, they stand side by side on the second floor of the bamboo building. I don't know why, Pei Qian is very powerful. Every time I hold a trekking pole, I just need to move towards the rain screen, and then there will be lightning and thunder. Every time she asks Pei Qian how to do it, Pei Qian said, "Millet grains, you can't learn how to do it." After Lu Xianyang left the first-line peak, he met with Dong Gu in a mountain temple on the outskirts of Shaogua in the north. Xiaoling smiled and said, "I just got a letter from Master Feijin. Let us hurry back. Master is in Xinqiu Mountain, waiting for us." Lu Xianyang was a little surprised, but Ruan Taijiang has not returned to Xinqiu Mountain for many years. Why, this boring gourd secretly looked at the mirrored flowers, and felt that the master's sword skills were not as good as his disciples. He lost face and was annoyed that he had to treat his own family law. Served. After the Dalisong family allocated the vast territory of the old Zhongyue to the Longquan Jianzong, they successively moved their family business to the north. First, Su Shaoqiao, where Xiaoling was responsible for the construction of the mansion and the repair of the Taoist temple. With the help of Daxing's civil engineering, he also needed to work with a Beiyue prince and mountain to stabilize the routes and water transport. Later, Ruan Qiong also opened the furnace and cast swords there. Dong Gu, the big disciple of the original Kaifeng mansion on Hengqi Peak, took 10 several sword sect disciples left the mountain on the west side of Longjis jurisdiction and went to Jianzong's new site to practice swords together, so that in the end only Lu Xianyang was left alone, guarding the blacksmith shop by the Longshu River. At present, the 4 oldest protagonists of the Longquan sword sect, except for Lu Xianyang, who is already a sword repairer in the Yupu realm, the senior brother Dong Gu is a chi practitioner in the Yuanying realm, Su Shaoqiao is a sword repairer in the Jindan realm, and Xiaoling is a master of Yuanying. Jing Jianqiu is a hidden formation master, and is proficient in alchemy. It's no wonder that Ruan Qiong is not in a hurry about receiving the prose and retransmitting it. He is even willing to make wedding clothes for others. Sending Yulu and Lu Yu, the embryos of sword fairies that can open up the peak, down the mountain is like giving away to others for nothing. Several Jindan Dixian. Ruan Qiong accepts disciples, always like this. If you say that before, there are people who think that the two sects are also based on swords, Zhengyangshan Jingyang Jianzong Longquan Jianzong. After Lu Xianyang asks the sword, no one thinks that Longquan Jianzong can only be supported by Xiaoling empty shelf. The Jade Purity Realm sword repair before the age of 50, let alone Aquarius, is one of the few existences left on any continent in the Howran world. Ms. Yu was also there, she just stood there, even if she didn't speak, she was pleasing to the eye, the flowers were beautiful, and the moon was reunited. Here, the mountain stood far away at the entrance of the temple, and saw the great Lu Jianxian who came by. The mountain bowed his head and bowed his waist with a bright smile. He didn't take the initiative to say hello. He didn't dare to disturb the young sword who was fighting bullfight in Jingyang Mountain. Lu Xianyang clasped his fists high and said, "I have disturbed the master of the mountain to clean up." The mountain hurriedly clasped his fists and said, "If there are immortals, spirits, little gods are very lucky." Lu Xianyang ran to rub his shoulders for the senior brother Dong Gu, and said with a smile, "Brother Dong and senior sister Su, after seeing master, you must speak for me. I will be a guest on Jingyang Mountain this time. The injury was serious, and if we tried our best to let us Longquan Jianzong show up, if the master would have to curse people, he would be too unconscionable, and would not teach the morality of the teacher. I would be depressed by the time and hurt the root of the Dao Dao. Master would not cry afterwards." Dong Gu smiled and nodded, "No problem. Actually, master doesn't like Xingyang Mountain. It's not a year or two. Su Xiaojiao is a stubborn temperament, with no sense of human affection. I can persuade a few words, but in the end it is the master who makes the decision. Lu Xianying turned his head and smiled and asked, Miss Yu, I'm asking Jian this time, is it okay? Credit Ye nodded and said, it's a good deal. Lu Xianying was dumb. Xiaoling can't help being laughed, one thing drops one thing. Thinking of something, Xiaoling said suddenly, I remember that master said in person that as long as anyone is in the Jade Pure Realm sword repair, whoever can be the next sect master. Lu Xianying frowned and said, why don't I know? Donggu nodded, master did say this, but at that time junior brother Lu was still studying in Nanpa Suozhou. Lu Xianying doubted, Xiaoling, are you sneaking into the Jade Pu Realm sword fairy? Xiaoling shook his head and said, no, the bottleneck of Yuaning is difficult to break, and it will take at least 10 years of hard work. Lu Xianying rubbed his chin, sure enough, I still have to rely on me. How much high incense Wan Tai Smith burned to receive such a proud disciple as I am. Lu Xianying was silent for a moment, and said to himself, if master returns to Shushan this time and intends to tell us about it, then I'll have to take up the burden. Chen Pin gone, that kid is the sovereign, he has no reason. Asked Ye, on the top of the sword, how much wine did you drink? Lu Xianying rolled his eyes and said, Donggu was relieved that Lu Xianying took the initiative to request his successor. Su Xiaojiao was convinced, and Xiaoling didn't care at all. He just thought it was a good thing. Except for Lu Xianying, Xiaoling really didn't think that the brothers and sisters could serve as the second lord of Longquan sword sect. The sage Wanqiong's Longquan sword sect, in addition to the earliest ancestral mountain Xinqiu Mountain, and Tiaoding Mountain and Hingcha Peak, each other has the potential to fight each other, plus the Kaiyunfeng, Xianchao Mountain, and Baolu Mountain leased from Luopa Mountain. Formed a piece of the hinterland of the sect, and then a group of hills were collected in the bag, forming a circle of sword sect outer forces, but compared to the Luopu Mountain, the number of people in the Longquan sword sect was always small. On the contrary, it seemed to be occupied by the latecomers of Luopa Mountain, and the Jianzong opened up a new place, and the progeny followed the move to the north, and finally formed a pattern in which Luopa Mountain was the only one. In fact, Wanqiong once wanted to take roots here, to receive the inheritance to receive and then to pass on each other, and then spread the branches and leaves, and finally in his hands, carry forward a sect, and as a gift from the Dali court Wanqiong originally intended to be the site of the next sect of the Longquan Jianzong on the site to the north of you, but only to come and go, it turned into an unconventional, big vassal, Xiaozu Mountain. On the borderline of the mountains and rivers of Longzhou, the sword light flashed, and the wind galloped around the mountains, following a predetermined route, and finally flew to Xinqiu Mountain. Wanqiong raised his hand to catch the hand of Xiaoling sent back. Letters to Fu Zhen, a few progeny are about to enter the borders of Huangting country. The letter said that Miss Yu would also eat rice. At first glance, it was Lu Xianying's tone. Wanqiong put away the Fu Zhen, began to cook, made a table of food by himself, and sat down as the owner of the house. I patiently waited for a few descendants and a guest to come to this ancestral mountain for a meal. Xiaoyu wanted to return to the blacksmith's shop alone, but Lu Xianying did not agree. He said in the letter that he had told master that you would be there. If you go back temporarily, you will not give face to Taijiang Yuan. In this area of Longzhou, Taijiang Yuan and Taijiang Wei are both responsible. Handle, these two are very good talkers most of the time, but occasionally they have small belly. When he arrived at the house, Wanqiong, who was usually not smirking with anyone, still had a little smile on Xiaoyu, called Miss Yu, and made a rare joke, saying that he was not an outsider, so you are welcome. If the food is not right, just say it. But Lu Xianying was so happy. Wan Taijiang still knows how to behave. He sat on a bench with Ye, Donggu and Su Xiaojiao, who were sitting across from their desks, sat in dignity. Xiao Ling was more casual, sitting back to the door. On the bench, Lu Xianyang helped everyone to serve the rice one by one. After taking a seat on the moon, he looked at a table of meals. Lu Xianyang felt that it was not too enjoyable, so he was going to pat the big brother on the shoulder and teach a few words. Dong Gu waved his hand, "Don't come to this set." Lu Xianyang smiled and walked out of the house and asked, "Miss Yu, let's go down the mountain together." Chen Yu shook her head, "No, I have to go back to the shop." Lu Xianyang went to Piyin Mountain alone and talked to Wei Bo. Wei Bo was stunned and it was of great importance. He neither shook his head nor nodded, and asked, "This is what Saint Wan meant?" Lu Xianyang patted his chest and laughed, "Mr. Wei Dashin, leave it alone. Anyway, now Longquan Jianzong, Lu Xianyang, have the final say." Wei Mo asked in doubt, "How to say?" Lu Xianyang laughed loudly and said, "I am already the new sect master. Isn't I the final say?" Wei Bo was silent for a moment. Lu Xianyang suppressed his smile and nodded. Wei Bo sighed and smiled and said, "Understood, do it now. At the court of Dali, I will help explain." Lu Xianyang said with emotion, "Friends like Wei Shanjun are hard to find with a lantern." On this day, Longquan Jianzong was in the mountains to the west. Except for the 3 hills rented from Luopa Mountain, they remained in place. The rest of the Shinshu Mountains, including the mountain Weibo, were summoned by the monarch of Beiyue Mountain. Join forces to display their magical powers and move to the old Zhongyue land boundary. From now on, there will be no Longquan sword sect in the old Lizhu cave, and there will only be a Luopa mountain with the prefix zone. When Wei Bo was busy, Lu Xianyang had been squatting on the top of Piyin Mountain, holding the grass roots in his sleeves with both hands. In fact, this is what Master Wanqiong meant, but I can't say it. Sword Chi Great Wall, Confucian shirts are left and right, sitting cross-legged, with horizontal sword on knees, looking forward. Chao Jun, who came here all the way across the sea, sat down not far away, panting for breath, and after his breath became calm, he smiled and turned his head to say hello, Mr. Zhua. Gently nod left and right. Chao Jun waited for a long time, and found that there was no meaning to speak on the left and right, so he had to bite the bullet and say, Mr. Zhua, wondered left and right, something. This sword fairy embryo from Nanpo Suozhou, after the sword heart is damaged, still dared to hand the sword on the 2 battlefields of Aquarius Island and Tonggishao, and now he has come here on his own initiative. It seems that he intends to use his sword against the wild world. The impression of this person has improved a lot. Chao Jun has 2 big heads. Then, didn't Chen Pingon mean that you are a senior? Let me come to Jinchi Great Wall to practice swords with you? This will not admit it. If you want to talk about the truth, you can avoid it. Chao Jun asked cautiously, Mr. Zhua, did you forget something? After blowing a breath, she subconsciously smiled and reminded her to be careful about burning, but she soon lost a laugh, made a grimace with her, lowered her head with chopsticks, and began to chew slowly. Ning Yao turned his head and looked around, without taking his eyes back for a long time. When Chen Pingon raised his head and looked over, only her trembling eyelashes could be seen again. When Ning Yao finished eating, she found that Chen Pingon had sleeves with both hands and looked at herself with a smile. Ning Yao thought for a while, not too hungry, let's have another bowl. Chen Pingon waved a big hand, if you have money in your pocket, eating more bowls of wontons is nothing. There are diners on the side that slander. It depends on your kid's ability. You have to be a down-and-out quack to get such pride from a bowl of wonton. Looking at the woman who squinted and smiled again, Bai Chong is so good-looking, and she is a really inconspicuous lady, so she will find such a pauper to live together and walk the rivers and lakes. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.